This is the Enjoyer Podcast. I'm your host, James Dixon. If Detroit is a symbol of America, of hard work, toughness, and the downfall of the once great, then Macomb County is a microcosm of Michigan. Anna Hoffman, a friend of the program, says it best. Michigan is going to Michigan. We always seem to go our own way as a state, even in the presidential race we just had. As Charlie LaDuff noted on this podcast, in 1972, Michigan Democrats actually supported a segregationist, George Wallace. Then in 1988, just 16 years later, they support Jesse Jackson. And then 20 years after that, they support Barack Obama. As a state, we voted twice for Donald Trump, then voted for Joe Biden in between those. And even just now, after sending Trump back to the White House, we also voted to send Democrat Alyssa Slotkin to the Senate. Our politics are like they used to say about our weather in Michigan. Don't like the politics in Michigan? Wait 5 minutes, and it'll change. Macomb County is Michigan's Michigan. Macomb County, our third largest county in Michigan, was home to the Reagan Democrats in the 1980s. These were blue-collar people. They didn't see themselves winning or valued in Jimmy Carter's America. Voting for a Republican was perhaps not their natural inclination, but these were a practical people above all. When the house is on fire, you get out, you get the kids and the dog out, but maybe you leave behind sentiment and sentimental items. And so by the time these Reagan Democrats voted for Reagan, there was no love lost for the Democrats. They knew what they were walking away from. A party of elites who walked away from them first. Macomb County, like my home county, Oakland, is a house divided. A Democrat, Mark Hackel, is the county executive. But he's not your typical Democrat either. Hackel was the only Democrat in Michigan to bristle at COVID restrictions under Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Hackel's just about the only Democrat who hasn't done media appearances, interviews, sent tweets, presenting Donald Trump as some kind of mortal enemy to America. He's one of the last normal politicians we have in Michigan. In Macomb County, the prosecutor is a Republican, and our first guest today, Pete Lucido. Lucido had just started a 4-year term as a state senator when Macomb County prosecutor Eric Smith ran into legal troubles. Smith, it turns out, had diverted money from the county's asset forfeiture program to benefit himself and his friends. This was easily traceable and caught, and was easily traced and caught. Smith was sent to a brief stint in federal prison, and Macomb County was left with the problem. Its top law enforcement officer just committed a great breach of the trust and got caught. Recently, in the pages of the Macomb Daily, the county's corporation counsel expressed shock at the high amount of FOIA requests these days. 5 years ago, in 2019, there were 434 FOIA requests. Last year, there were more than 1,000. This year is expected to top 1,200. It's not any wonder why. After what we just saw with Eric Smith, it's not a shock that people would want to know what their county officials are doing and that those things are above board. John Skapka, corporation counsel for the county, probably said it best in an interview with Jameson Cook. A lot of people want to know what the government is up to, he said. It is their right to know. I sort of applaud them for taking an interest. John, we're going to have to work on you on that sort of. We can just offer the applause. You don't have to modify it. Look, when you can't trust your county's top lawman, who can you trust? It was a want to restore that trust that led Lucido to fill Smith's seat. He won in 2020. He won again in 2024. To serve as prosecutor, Lucido had to give up his Senate seat. So as a public servant, this is a man who decided to leave the herd in Lansing, where he's one of 38 senators, and instead come back and be a top 3 leader in his community. Pete, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. Pete, welcome to the Enjoyer Podcast.
Good to see you, James, and thanks for having me. There's a lot to say as to your opening statement. And
absolutely.
As a former probation officer, parole officer, as a former public defender in Wayne County for 3 years, as a former 34 or 35 years now, doing defense work before I took the role of prosecutor, and being a lawmaker and changing all the laws that didn't fit or didn't have the need to be on the books anymore, repeal them. I noticed that we have a huge appetite in criminal justice reforms. It was one of the largest criminal justice reforms when I was in the Senate. We did raise the age. That was my bill with a bunch of my other colleagues, both sides of the aisle, 100% in agreement. Why are you charging a 17-year-old with adult crimes when you can't enter into a legal contract, you can't enter the military without parental consent, and you can't even sit on a jury until you're 18. So really, what farce has been going on? We were one of three counties, 3 states in the United States that did this. And I said, for what? And I asked judges the same thing. If I can't sit on a jury till I'm 18, what am I doing? But we did more. I did civil asset forfeiture reform well beyond and well before Prosecutor Smith received his walking papers.
Right.
And I knew that the highest office of trust was breaking down. And as a former criminal defense lawyer, what better person after serving in the legislature and taking on all of those laws? And I mean a lot, James. Over 100 bills I passed when I was there for just a short period of time, 6 years. It was time for me to come home and straighten out the prosecutor's office, and I did just that. I rid the entire office of corruption. I brought in new units that were modernized. I brought in new technology, and I stood steadfast on my commitment to the county voters that I'm going to make this thing right for you so that you can regain trust again in the county prosecutor's office.
Absolutely. Pete, we'll start you here. What do you enjoy about Michigan?
Number one, I'm homegrown, born in Macomb. I never left. I mean, I went to schools all the way through in Macomb until I had to go to law school. Then I went downtown. I went to Detroit De La Salle, though, high school, and I took the DSR bus, and that might be before your time.
That's way before my time.
You got it. And I got off the bus at Harper and Connor and stuck my finger out and hitchhike, and they don't do that anymore.
No.
But that was back in the 70s, and I really enjoyed growing up around the city. I really enjoyed being in the city while I went to Detroit College of Law, which is center field now, Comerica Park. I also had the opportunity of living the dream of practicing in Wayne County as a public defender and then as a practitioner for many years. The judges.
Talk about experience.
Well, you're talking about a guy that has more experience in his pinky than anybody that could run against me. And the whole issue is when you take the whole ball of wax, which is private practice, public defense, in addition, lawmaker, state in regards to the House and the Senate, and then coming back and being the prosecutor, what better career? Like I said, I lived the dream that only God could have gave me, and he gave it to me. And he said, do well with your gifts, son. And I did the best I could. And I'm going to continue that journey because I got more work to do now in the prosecutor's office, because I do believe that even though your technology is bringing it up, because we got body cameras and door cameras and camera, you got a lot of what's called of this media that you've got to condense. And there's a way of now knowing that you can give it to the defense lawyers so you don't have any more Brady violations. You know, I started the first hate crime unit, all funded by federal grants, so it doesn't cost the local taxpayers $1. I started the Conviction Integrity Program in Macomb County. I mean, let's face it. I mean, I got grants for all this, and it doesn't cost the taxpayers any. I went on and got a hate crime unit going on where, let's face it, we have the most diverse population in the entire state here in Macomb County. We've got a diversity of nations among all of the population of almost 1 million in Macomb County. I saw that as a practitioner. I saw the indifferences, I'll call them, and injustices that were given to certain individuals that came from a foreign country. And I also know that that's where my grandma and grandpa came. So at one time, they must have been discriminated against. I just wasn't born yet. Same with the Polish, same with the Germans, same with the Irish. Those were the first 4 major ingredients that were going on in Macomb County, as well as Wayne County. And then all of a sudden, you got the Yugoslavians, Albanians, Chaldeans, you got the Hmong, you got the Bangladeshi. You can just throw it all in there. The reality is, you represent everybody. And as what's called a minister of justice, everybody deserves the same justice, not just those that have, but those that have not. And at the state level, as a House of Representatives, I made sure that the MEDC, the Michigan Economic Defense Council, had the money, because I remember too many people that were let down by the justice system. And I mean by this, I'm sitting there with a guy that needs a investigator to go kick some doors in the middle of the night to find the witnesses when the crime was allegedly occurred. The judge denied me because they had no money. And how about this? I got a chemist that's going to go against me to talk about chemistry. I failed chemistry when I was back in high school. So I don't know nothing about it. And here I got to defend a guy, no chemistry. When I asked for what's called an expert, guess what the judge said? Motion denied, no money. Well, how are you supposed to fight fair when the government has all the resources and you're sitting there with a chain that's around, a belly chain around somebody's belly and their hands cuffed to it that you got to hide underneath the table? And then we got a chance to put tablecloths on so they wouldn't see the jumpsuit. I started giving them clothes that I couldn't fit into anymore, and I brought them in my office and threw them on the defendants just to make it look like it was a fair trial. But it wasn't. It never was. When they didn't have anybody there, when their family gave up on them, when they didn't have any money, how just is the system? Till the MED stepped in and gave them now information? No. They gave them resources that can have a defense lawyer actually do the job that they're charged with. So let's play fair. And that means that the justice system, albeit it's unjust some days,
of course,
at least looks fair.
That used to bother me as a crime reporter, especially, as time went on. I can remember a case in Warren where I talked to, the chief Dwyer at the time and talked to the mayor. And I mean, just had everything buttoned up with what I was told about this case, where basically it was like a guy like beaten on the side of the road and then he ran into traffic and got killed. And then later I see the story come across after it's been adjudicated. That guy actually beat the charges. That guy beat the charges because the narrative that I was given up front didn't survive the examination. It's just like the Bible says, you can present a case and sound good, but when that thing gets cross-examined, then you really find out what you have. And so I learned inherently you can't write a fair crime story.
I have to put my defense hat back on for a little bit. I think being a defense lawyer, probably the only one in the state. We got 83 counties in Michigan.
Yeah.
And when I look at ours, the third largest, I'm wearing a defense hat first, and I'll tell you why. It leads itself to knowing where the holes are in the system and where I can gain the confidence and the respect of my peers in the prosecutor's office, because I was a respected, honest, truthworthy defense lawyer. I didn't pull no punches. I didn't lie like some of these guys are out there. One case you may get away with, but your career is shot with the prosecutor's office.
Right.
And when I didn't have a good case, and I knew I didn't have a good case, I would do the best I could to try to plea bargain. But today's system is a little more advanced. It has these body cams, which is it's all caught on tape. So it's hard for somebody not to know that the language that's being used, the actual statements that are being made is all recorded. A little more difficult to try to beat a case than a 1 or 2 sentence police report and a couple Polaroid pictures that were taken after the event. So it's changed significantly to the better, to be honest with you, to the better.
Right, because the more evidence you gather, I mean, it's like with body cameras.
Yep.
I think police, 10 years ago, I remember this happened after Mike Brown, and so no one liked the context of it being brought up because cops, get sensitive. Oh, you're saying we did something wrong. But I think they soon realized, wait a minute. If I didn't do something wrong and I'm accused, this camera can help me.
From the moment that they activate or don't activate their bubbles, which is the stop, to the time they get them out of the car or ask them questions at the scene, in the car maybe, we have a full breadth of what's really taken place, why the stop was made, if there was probable cause, or what the radio run was with a 911 call. There's all kinds of information that we have now at our disposal when charging. And I take it very seriously. You charge somebody with a crime, you better have at least probable cause. Otherwise, you're not working for me anymore. And here's the reason why. You ruin somebody's life and their family's life. You disintegrate and degrade that individual because the papers pick it up and the social media is alive and well. It destroys their livelihood and who their very essence of being is. So before you ink that warrant, better have what it says, because I told them your integrity and honesty as a prosecutor means everything to fulfill the system. That's what you need. And I give them that speech at the time they were sworn in. Your integrity above all is paramount in this business.
I wish that were a more widely believed statement in the law. So you had a choice to make a few years ago. You could have kept rising in Lansing. And, certainly when Democrats took over the whole legislature after 2022, you probably would have been one of the leading voices of pushback against Whitmer, like I'm sure your friend Jim Runstead is. But then, Macomb County back then had a lot going on. They had a recent clerk, a Karen Spangler. Turns out she wasn't even eligible for office. Then its top lawman goes down in a corruption case. So I could see leaving Lansing for, the purity of your hometown, right? Where people are who they say they are, and it's just the life you grew up in. But to the untrained eye, it might look like you left one swamp for another. How'd you see it back then, this move back to the home front?
I got to tell you, I needed a reprieve in my life, but I also do tell you this. Above all, thyself be true. It's so notable to me. I tell my kids I got 3 feet if God was willing to give me that in my life. The first 12 inches, I educate myself or go get a trade or do something that you really love to do. I mean, love it. And then the next 12 inches, you go ahead and work your tail off and make all the money or do everything you wanted to do in that career. And the last 12, think about how to give it back and make a difference in the world so people remember you and the footprint you left, because there's no U-Haul you're taking this stuff with you. So you better give it back and be a good steward of those things that God gave us. And I truly believe this, and I'll tell you why. The last thing you got, James, is your name to give back into a community. And if you have children, that's what you want to leave, a good name, a solid name that people said, hey, your dad was a champion as it related to criminal justice.
Yes.
Look what happened. I left a lucrative, and I mean lucrative, career in the law business to go to Lansing to make law. Who in their right mind would want to do that?
Who does that?
Nobody. Somebody who cared enough to say there has to be change in the law to make fundamental fairness fundamentally fair again. I went to Lansing. I served 2 terms. That's 4 years in the state house. Was rocking and rolling, and I mean worked my tail off. I left my practice completely. This wasn't a part-time job. It was full.
Oh, my God.
Summers. And then I went to the Senate 2 years before this broke loose, and they said, Lucido, you're needed at home. You need to come back and change the complexion of what it is that you love, which is you've been born in this town, you raised your children, you stayed here, you grew your business and opened your business here in Macomb. I could have chose anywhere. Could have chose downtown and stayed in the Buell building, or I could have stayed at any of those buildings.
Right.
But I came home to Macomb for one reason. I wanted to give back something that this entire community gave me. They gave Pete love, and they gave Pete a chance to make a good living, take care of his family. And now that my kids were all grown and through college and everything, it was time for me to do my public service. And public service, and I mean public service because I think it cost me money to run for office. I make no money in a job.
How is it worth it? I've talked to so many of you who have, had to miss big chunks of your kids' childhood, marriages affected. I mean, just more sacrifice than you'd ever think is worthwhile. What does make it worthwhile?
What you're saying is spot on for those that have tried to grow their family while they're servicing in government. But I waited for all that. I waited till my kids got through or were about to graduate. And I said, you know what?
Right.
It's time now, Pete. You got the 1/3 left of your life. Look at the timing. You're going there not as a 30-year-old or 28-year-old. You're going there in your 50s. Okay? Late 50s, I went to the Capitol to serve. And I said, God has given me at least the resources to walk away, leave my plow in the fields, okay?
Yes.
And then go do government, but don't leave the plow too long. Come on back home, because that thing needs to get out of the rain and get started again. And some of these people in Lansing, no, not so much because we had term limits, but in Congress and the U.S. Senate, Stevie Wonder can see clearer than them. I mean, they're there forever. And for what? There should be term limits. I like that because I think after 40, 50 years, what are you bringing new to the table? What are you bringing new? I'll give you a good example. The day after the election, my executive came out about road funding and fund the roads and all this.
Right.
They had majority in the Senate and in the House and in the leadership government there with the
they held all the gavels in Lansing. They bragged about it.
Is this on? Can you hear me in the back?
Mm-hmm.
You know what? We had a chance to change that funding with the leadership that they had. Why are we doing it now? Okay. And I had a bill in. It was keep the registration fees in the county in which they're collected because the insurance industry said,
right,
you're going to go 20 to 25 miles maximum to work. People want to work and live close to where they work so they don't put too many miles on their car. They don't have any wear and tear. The gasoline's too much. Keep at least the registration fees only in the county in which the car or vehicle is registered.
Right.
That would mean trucks in Detroit. That would mean all of that would stay in the county. And when they break up all those roads, not bridges, not highways, but the roads themselves, you will see a drastic change because the money is going to solidify helping where all these vehicles are registered. And then leave the gas tax alone right now because it's a Christmas tree. You got to go into schools and you got to go into who knows. The bottom line is leave the gas tax alone. Keep the registration fees in the county that were collected. We'll share with our friends up north, because we do like to travel up north, the gas tax, because we got a lot of gas being pumped down here to travel up north.
Right. Absolutely. How you mentioned this earlier, and you mentioned the hate crime thing. I could see that going one of two ways in Macomb. I could see some people saying, hey, it's an acknowledgement of how diverse we've come. I could see other people saying, is there a such thing? Like, if that guy shoots me because I'm Bangladeshi, why is that worse than a man shooting his wife who he loves so she doesn't leave him?
Good
Seems
point.
Love crimes are worse than hate crimes. Why would I punish the hate crime worse?
It's a good point. When you're looking at somebody and because they're Bangladeshi walking on the sidewalk and you get a guy to jump the curb and go after him with his car and they're screaming and yelling out there about, they're calling them names. That's hate. That's what's different. And the hate crime, we were one of 16 prosecutors' offices in the country. One of 16 to get the grant. $1.6 million over 4 years to go ahead because I used the diversity card saying, tell me what county's more diverse than Macomb. I mean,
Right.
We got it all. You know what? It's like an Italian wedding soup that I got going here. You got everything in this thing.
You do.
And I really enjoy the fact that I get a benefit of listening to the cultures, and our children get a chance to taste foods that they would have never tasted before, but for those foreign individuals coming here and opening up shop. So I'm all good with it. The bottom line is we got to live amongst each other, up and down the neighborhoods. Don't do something stupid, okay? It ain't going to be but your problem because I ain't going to tolerate it. You're going to be charged. Hell with it.
Now, you got to see the Lansing media up close as a lawmaker. So Lansing, I consider those not quite local reporters. They're capital reporters, a lot like the Washington press corps. And they should, maybe not representing the local communities lawmakers come from. They're kind of giving you the high level overview for 10 million people. Then you return home and you're covered more by the Detroit media, the Macomb County, the Jameson Cooks of the world. How do you compare the two, and do you find that there is any difference in the honesty, the candor, the quality from Lansing to local?
No doubt about it. The media is biased. They're prejudiced. In fact, they don't report the true story. They report what they want, which is editorial to sell their papers.
Right.
And I can tell you, when you're being recorded, such as in this case, and you're put in front of the media, whether it be the news or an interview, they cut off that portion that they don't want the listener to hear. Same with social media. It's no different. They hack those things that are going to look beneficial to one side and diminish the value to the other side. I kind of like this. You want a true statement? Why don't you put it all on tape and get it out to that reader so that they say, well, wait, he didn't say that. They cut you short of really what you said, and I didn't like that. But you know what? It just goes to show you that the voters aren't that stupid in this last election. They understood that there was a slant, a bias, a prejudice, we're going to go against Republicans, period.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's just say it because
they weren't even trying to hide it anymore. No, they needed it to work. They didn't need you to believe it anymore. They just needed it to work one last time.
As long as I've been around, I'm the first Republican prosecutor they've ever had in this county. In fact, with the Karen Springer, Larry Rocca, that came in 16 when Trump won. They washed in, and it was a huge tides were turning. And then Forlini got in, I got in, and now we've got 4 of the 5 major seats held by Republicans that are actually showing the benefit of having good government in there. I got to tell you, Candace Miller looking over our water. Okay, I call her the godmother of the Great Lakes. Godmother of the Great Lakes. We got Forlini over there double checking everybody's vote. I got Rocca counting money backwards, forwards, sideways. And Lucido making sure that you're going to be held accountable if you go ahead and screw up in Macomb. I don't mind redemption, but you first got to show me accountability. Then I'll give you redemption.
You know, you served in the time of Trump.
Yep.
And people might even think of you as kind of a local Trump. You are brash. You're not shy. You're outspoken. Why do you think Donald Trump has been so effective, just overall, but also in Michigan? I mean, in 2012, we had Mitt Romney, a native son, and it's not even arguable that the people of Michigan have embraced Donald Trump more than they did the Mitt Romney model of Republican. Why do you think that is?
I got the answer. Macomb County is unique and different than any other county at the state level. I learned this boots on the ground. They were always like, oh my God, another one from Macomb. We are in your face, say it like it is kind of people. It's a blood sport, politics in Macomb County. When you hear about politics in Macomb County, you realize the gloves are off from the beginning of the time you file. So if you're not going to be in your face kind of that way, and that's why Trump was so effective, because he hit on the issues, especially this time. If you want 4 more years of the same, you gave Kamala and you gave Biden a chance to perform. They did not perform. You're paying more for this. And they hit on those issues. Right. And people in Macomb County said, we're not going to take this anymore. And even Democrats are saying, this has gone too far. It has gone so far left, I don't even know what the center means anymore.
They were not Democrats by the end. My theory on the whole Trump thing is that everybody needed a system reset that a Trump victory would represent. I think Republicans needed to remember that they could win elections. Everything's not stolen and rigged. You could not only win, but you could win the popular vote too. It's not impossible. And Democrats needed to learn you can't just call everybody Hitler and scream abortion and win every election.
They didn't do what they needed to do was this. You keep yelling abortion. Is that the best you got when
it is the best they have?
What? The Michigan Supreme Court or the U.S. Supreme Court changed it up, got rid of Roe v. Wade, and the legislature went ahead and repealed the old law. You can have 5 abortions if you want. I'll say
then
it. Then
they got limitless abortion in 2022. So by the time they said it this time, it wasn't true anymore because they had so much success in giving us limitless abortion.
And one more thing. The Republican Party was fractured. We didn't have in my estimate, we couldn't raise money and we had leadership was lacking, period. We did the best we could, but there's a better, stronger Republican Party coming, I think, based on the fact that we are now reinstilled beliefs that, look, if we all work together and we work hard, we'll get our candidates elected. The one that was a disappointment, and I think I know why, was Mike Rogers. And let's face it. Here, look at Mike was going against the establishment, period. But Mike also was a party to that establishment.
Yes.
When he was in Congress. Now, what does he have to do or what does he have to say? I think he got a late start with some things, and I think that he gained momentum as time went on. And
he made it close. It was not going to be close.
But what was it that we lacked at the end to get him over?
A fighter. I watched 2 debates. I watched 2-hour-long debates, one in Grand Rapids, one in Detroit. That race became close because stories dropped Oppo on Slotkin. And they say, oh my God, this lady doesn't pay her property taxes. Oh my God, she's not a farmer. Oh my God, the first time she ever voted was for herself in 2018. And then you don't use any of that in 2-hour-long debates. To me, Rogers was the last Romney Republican.
I can tell you this. The commercial at the very end with his wife was the best commercial I saw when she said, let me tell you about my husband.
Yes.
I'm tired of them saying that he's going to have these and abortions and he did vote it this way. My husband has already said, and I'm a woman, no more abortions. You can do what you want to do. I am not in for this whole thing. So stop talking about it. But let me tell you what my husband's going to do. Mm-hmm. That's where the value is. Tell us what you're going to do. We're tired of hearing the same old flack or flim-flam bullshit, I say. Flim-flam bullshit. Stop it. Tell us what you're going to do.
And I think we're tired of hearing, this. Look, I get that he wasn't going to do something on abortion, but that skittering away from it signals fear. Signals that you can be pushed off your square. Now you have to have your wife come speak for you. Man, say it with your chest.
Yeah.
Tell us who you are, because every moment you spend responding to propaganda actually strengthens the propaganda.
I agree with you.
And Alyssa Slotkin, look, we said not a real farmer, takes this fake property, and she never responded. They didn't sell it. It's like in pro wrestling. They didn't sell the punch, which made people think that she wasn't punched.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a big missed opportunity, and I think you said it perfectly. That lack of fight and that moment of fight or flight sent people the wrong signal.
But look at the numbers, though, with Trump. I mean, he conquered so many. I mean, every single state of swing states he won. How does that happen? Well, you know what it is? I'm tired. I'm not going to be taken for granted. I'm not going to be silenced any longer. I'm going to give my vote because they're not listening to me. And that's exactly what the Democrats better realize. You better listen and you better respond. Otherwise, you're going to continue to lose your votes.
We'll get you out of here on this one, Pete. I know you got stuff to do. On November 5th, the Michigan House was the only legislative chamber in America to flip. And so we went from a 2-seat Democrat majority to now a 4-seat Republican majority. You've seen these last 2 years. You've seen one-party rule in Michigan. You've seen absolute power corrupt absolutely. Why do you think Michigan voters rejected that?
Silence. I think with Governor Whitmer and her failed leadership that she had during COVID, and it's failed. There's nobody's going to tell me any differently. I fought for the COVID patients that were coming out of the hospital and being put into nursing facilities for the $5,000 extra dollars.
Yeah.
There's not one doctor that said that this is the type of medicine that was beneficial to your health. I also feel that this thing about bonding for the roads, $3 billion, she fooled you once when she said, I'll fix the damn roads. Yeah, she fixed it with your money. She's leaving, and tomorrow we're going to have to borrow more money unless we change that formula, which I gave you in the beginning of the show, how that formula should be. And lastly, you cared more about the national stage than you did us here at home.
She made that quite clear.
You identifying yourself as a presidential candidate, but saying, I'm not going to take it. You wanted Kamal to get in there for one reason, so you could have a plum job in 2 years when you're what's called termed out. That ain't going to happen now. So the only thing you got left is you want to run against Gary Peters because he's up in 2 years and 26. That stage
not happening.
Yeah, you got it. And you look at it. Trump knows where he got momentum, and it's here in Michigan. He knows that we pulled the stops out and did everything for him. And God bless him for going to do this nonsense because he had 2 assaults on his life, and he's still willing to serve. God help his whole family.
I don't get Donald Trump. I don't get what makes a billionaire say that this is worth it. I think about his life all up and down the East Coast. Best food, prettiest women, most beautiful settings you could ever imagine. And to give that up for the physical ugliness, but the literal ugliness of politics, His life was never in danger. I guess outside of that helicopter ride with Willie Brown, however many years ago, this guy lived high on the hog all his life. And to go from that to getting shot in the head for politics, to have that schedule he kept at the very end. Look, I'm going to need a nap after I take this podcast because podcasting tires me out. This guy did 3 hours on Rogan, didn't even use the bathroom when he was in the building. What is Donald Trump? I'm sure you've met him. What?
Oh, yeah, I've met him. I'll tell you what
is he a real person?
He is the real deal, and here's why. He hasn't taken the paycheck. Remember, he went there to serve, and he said, I'm not serving myself, so the check, you can donate. If it's got to come to me, all of it goes to donation. I got to tell you, ain't one of them politicians that done that. Let me know. I'm from the show me state, Missouri. Show me where it's at. And the last thing is, who in their right mind would take all these indictments as well as weaponization of the justice system to come on him in New York and all these other cities to do what? Pay for lawyers to get him out of this?
Right.
There is you know what? What Democrat can they possibly say even could shine his shoes right now? Who?
Even among Republicans, I was a DeSantis guy.
Yeah.
Ron DeSantis could not have taken any of the heat. And he didn't take any of the heat. I mean, let's imagine Ron DeSantis getting in lawfare for sending the illegals to other states. If he gets put in that box, he's trapped in that box and remains trapped in that box. Donald Trump is like an escape artist.
He used his own resources to invoke his rights under the justice system. And I'm not going to say that, you know what, I put a convicted felon in the White House. I'm going to say I put the right person in the White House during these unprecedented times in the justice system where people brought charges and forgot about the law just to get a conviction to make him not feel that he was adequate enough to go run for president. Even in spite of the conviction, he decided to continue to run. Not too many men or women can have that type of attitude.
I think two things are going to happen. I think by 2029, including the media, they're all going to be laughing at the old man's jokes. He's going to be America's grandfather. It'll be like Reagan at the end, probably minus the dementia, but I do think there'll be that widespread understanding that it's okay to enjoy Donald Trump again, just like we used to when he was on The Apprentice. And I think another thing will happen is, like someone said the other day, I thought it was so clever. They said 50 years from now, kids are 100% going to think that the phrase trumped up charges owes to the Donald Trump lawfare.
Never thought of that, but you got
what else could you think? It's like it's like the phrase "your name is Mudd." You know, when you learn that there's a doctor, Howard Mudd, I believe, who helped set one of the Lincoln assassins' legs, and then his reputation, his family's still trying to fix that 160 years later. You see, like so that phrase does not owe to that thing, but you would think so, right? You would totally think so. So I think he's headed toward legendary, and I hope the lesson we all take is you better be willing to stand and fight when challenged.
One more thing, James, on this Veterans Day, we're sitting here both talking about how great these individuals are. They wouldn't have the right to be great if it wasn't for our veterans. And, taking one day out of the year to thank our veterans isn't enough. You got to look at the amount of people that served to make this all happen in these elections. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have that. So God bless all the veterans and their families. Give them more than they ever deserved because they kept our freedoms and kept us free during the most trying times in the country's histories. And lastly, I hope Donald Trump uncovers all of those things that we wanted to know, the assassination of President Kennedy. I'm sure that's going to come out real soon about.
We need those documents.
We need it more than ever because if it's our own government killing our own president, it's a good idea to get that out there so that the American people know this shit does happen. It does happen.
Yeah. Pete, thank you.
Thank you, James. Have a great afternoon, and God bless you, and God bless America.
Our second guest today is Hannah Osantowske. Hannah has both experience in youth and just came off a successful effort with the John James campaign in Macomb County. Hannah had a good life in Washington before returning home to her community and home to her parents' house to fight the good fight. In 2022, James pulled a rabbit out of the hat. On a bad night for Republicans in Michigan, James broke through in a wave year to win a Macomb County seat by 1,600 votes. James versus Carl Marlinga was the third closest race in America that year. The rematch was highly anticipated. But like most sequels, James Marlinga 2 didn't quite match up. This time, James beat the elderly Marlinga by 6 points, 26,000 votes. So what is it about Macomb County that makes people like Pete Lucido give up good lives in Lansing and Hannah give up good lives in Washington to return home and fight? What is it about Michigan that makes people forsake the worlds they know to return home and help? Hannah, I want to welcome you to the Enjoyer podcast. Thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you. My inaugural visit, which is awesome. And we can talk all about Michigan and Macomb County.
Absolutely. So Hannah, I think you're the exact kind of person Michigan needs. Young, smart, skilled. And typically there's two types of people we lose in Michigan. We lose retirees and we lose people like yourself who find their career success in cities like New York, Washington, Chicago. But we actually got you to come back from Washington to your hometown and even to your home to work the James campaign. So, Hannah, we'll start here. It's our standard first question. What do you enjoy about Michigan?
Oh, that's a hard one. I mean, top of my head, probably Michigan summers. Before I came back to Michigan, I worked in Louisiana, and it was actually funny. A lot of people from Louisiana visit Traverse City, and they always used to say, oh, Michigan summers, there's nothing like it. It's perfect in the morning and nighttime, and the daytime is pleasant. So I think Michigan summers, lake life, there's nothing, nothing compares to Michigan lake life. It's super comfortable, relaxing. For those who have been to Mackinac Island or have a cottage up north, you guys know what it's like to just live on lake time. It's different, and it's relaxing, and you get to catch your breath for a second.
Now, tell me about your life in Washington. I spent my rookie year there, and from what I remember, Washington's a beautiful city, more so on the inside than the outside. Outside can be sketchy and hit or miss from neighborhood to neighborhood, but from building to building, it can be a gorgeous place with great service and all that stuff. And I always remember being a little bit sad when I had to return home to Michigan because it felt like that area was so green and vibrant and alive, and then it felt just so gray when I got back. What did you leave behind to come back to Macomb?
So when I was in DC, I was working on Capitol Hill as a communications director. It was great, fast paced. Every day you know this. Every day in DC is different. There's always a different party. There's always a different headline. There's always a different drama on the Hill. So it's really fun and fast paced. And I recommend everybody to go to DC at some point in their career.
It's a great city to work in.
It's a great experience and it's a great city, but, obviously under the Biden administration, it's gotten significantly more dangerous to be a young female there. So living there on my own was it was fun. It was cosmopolitan. I had the time of my life, but living there by myself and working out in the morning, walking down the street, it's scary. So, Detroit, everyone likes to lambast Detroit and Michigan, but we do have safer suburbs than, the Metro DC area. So that's part of the reason why I moved back because, I can go do things in the suburbs of my hometown that's not, as dangerous as it would be in DC and have that peace of mind of okay, I know where I'm going. This is comfortable. One, it's a comfort level thing, but two, the headlines that come out of DC are very real. It's a very dangerous city. And, I think President Trump coming back to DC, the promises he's made to kind of flip the city around and make it safe again for families. But the headlines you see, school children visiting and everything, it's not really a great time to be there. So that was part of the reason why I moved back. And two, Congressman John James, who represents the 10th Congressional District, he's my home congressman, and I've known him for a long time, and he needed somebody to help his reelection. So I decided to come back and help. It was personal for me, so.
Absolutely. So James Marlinga 2, it was closely watched. We wrote, at least one story about it at New York Post, but everyone was watching it because it was so close last time. Why wouldn't it be close again this time? You thought it was going to be close. I never thought it was going to be close. The way I looked at it was, look, man, Carl Marlinga was an institution in Macomb County. There's no question. But he also managed to lose in a blue wave year. So I didn't take it being close as a sign of his strength. I took it like I used to say probably 2 months ago about Mike Rogers, that even if Trump won, I felt like there was a risk he could lose even in a wave year. And I think that's what Marlinga did. So I didn't think this one would be so close. So if we could do this, why was the first race so close? What was your read on what happened then?
Well, like you said, it was a wave year. I think abortion on the ballot didn't really help a lot of Republicans running.
That cleared us out.
Yeah, but the voters made their decision on how they wanted the state to handle abortion, and now that's a settled issue in Michigan. And I think, and we can go back to this later, part of the reason why the Dems got wiped out in Michigan is they said, like, we had families talking about how they can't afford groceries, they have to work a second job, and they said, no, wait, we want to talk about a settled issue. Abortion is settled, but let's talk about that. Let's obsess about that. Like, yeah, it's great. You can't put gas in your car, but let's talk about abortion. So, that's a settled issue in Michigan now. It's over with. Kudos to John. He's a very strong Republican, bright future. Somebody who will be a leader in Michigan for a long time, was able to outrun, that proposition on the ballot. And he did a great job, differentiating himself, not from Republicans, because this is the big part about Macomb County that everyone misses every single year. And the national people fly in and they like to have their fancy headlines, and this is ground zero for the election. Right. But people in Macomb County, they elect people, not politicians. They elect people, not political parties. So for them, that's why they will elect, a Democrat sheriff and a Republican prosecutor. And that's why they want a Republican congressman who's a combat veteran, who has been in the automotive supply chain business. So for them, they really look at the person at heart. They don't really make a decision on party lines.
Now, why was the second race not so close? Carl Marlinga is still an institution. John James had only had 2 years to show himself, and it's tough to stand out in Congress by its nature, how many people there are. But why was it not even competitive this time?
Well, let's just start with the Democrats' arrogance. They thought they knew better than everyone else. I'm sure driving around Metro Detroit, and especially in Oakland County, you've seen a few of these. It's like Harris walls, obviously. Because there's no other choice, right. Obviously. Like, no, it's not that obvious. Like, I'm great that that's what you think. Like, it's an easy choice for you, but, there's a lot of people struggling to pay rent. They can't make their utility bills. Cost of gas is too high. Automotive plants are laying people off across John's district and, across Michigan and the country, quite frankly.
Stellantis just announced more of them. I'm like, who's left working there at this point?
Yep. And, Stellantis on the horizon is going to be a bigger issue. And I think that's, a great reason why John got reelected is he'll be able to work with President Trump to tackle that head on, because they employ a lot of people in our district, but across Michigan. And that means, jobs, local bars, restaurants that serve these people who, one, work on the assembly line, but two, an HQ. That brings a lot of business to Michigan, and that would be devastating if they left.
Now, we've mentioned this. You've had a good life, and then you came back. But you came back for a competitive seat. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you came back for something that was just set in stone, obviously going to win. Tell us about the Macomb County that drew you back. Why was the thought of returning home appealing to you?
Well, part of it is the culture we have in Macomb. It's not comparable to anywhere else, which is funny. The closest thing that I could compare it to is the Jersey of Michigan. Although I know I'm going to have a lot of Jersey
of Michigan. Interesting.
Yeah. I'm going to have a lot of people who are going to be really upset about that. But that's the truth. I mean, we have an interesting, it's a melting pot of cultures, right? The Chaldean community is very big in Macomb County. The Polish community is very big in Macomb County, and the Italian community. Then on top of that, we have automotive and defense manufacturing. So it's really a melting pot of unique cultures and industries, unlike anywhere else. And, everyone wants to say, oh, this is ground zero, or my congressional district is the most unique. But I do think this 10th congressional district in Macomb County is one of the most unique places in the country. And I think, Democrats in the media flying in every year and they're like, oh, this is ground zero for our election. This is ground zero for our efforts. And then they leave the rest of the year and they don't care what happens. And I think that's part of the apathy, for this unique electorate, is that Democrats didn't care, and they every year they fly in and they want to do their, story in a diner, and they don't come back the off years when people are struggling just as much. They love their headlines in Macomb County. And, I'll give great credit to Selena Zito, who I'm sure you know very well. She does very great granular stories about the culture and what affects people and what life is like in Macomb County. So if Democrats were smart, they would, get their crap together and stop taking Macomb County for granted, because I know Republicans don't. We have a lot of blue dog and Reagan Democrats in our district that we work very hard to connect with on the issues that matter to them. And it's worked for us, tenfold, especially this election.
There are a not insignificant number of people. It's not a small group. I hear it quite a bit. How the hell could Donald Trump have won, but Mike Rogers lost? Mm-hmm. Help explain that through the lens of Macomb County, why that is a possibility and not impossible.
I'll give you the perfect example. So earlier this year, we were canvassing in Roseville and St. Clair Shores, and these are very unique voters. They, only care about Donald Trump, and they only care about the policies that he is putting forth. And I think part of the reason is he is connected. Yeah, and people like to say, the working man line that Donald Trump uses is so cliche, like him saying he's fighting for workers is so cliche. It's like, no, people really connect with that, and they really feel deeply about that. And part of the reason is because that's like the life they're very honest people. People from Macomb County get up every day at 5 or 6 a.m. They go to work. They work 9 to 5. They come home, and they don't want to be told they're toxic people or they're Nazis or they're insurrectionists. So part of the reason is, Democrats had apathy. They thought they were better than everyone else. And Donald Trump said, no, I'm going to fight for you. I understand what you're going through. I get it's hard. I'm listening to you. I'm here for you, and I will support you. And that resonated with people. So it's part of the reason why he won so overwhelmingly and outstandingly. I told everyone I was like 2020, this election was like 2016 on steroids. And everyone's like, what? Really? I was like, just wait until the election results come in. I said, Trump is going to sweep Michigan. I just know it.
You were exactly right.
He cleaned up.
So why did that not carry over for Rogers? It sounds like what reading between the lines, you're basically saying when you knock on doors, people want to hear about Trump, and then it's an uphill battle for anything else.
Mm-hmm. I think part of the reason is running for Senate is hard. I mean, John did it twice. I was there with him when he did it both times. It's a hard race to run. You have to balance the top of the ticket. It's very unique race to run, right? It's like you have to represent the whole state, but you also have to think like a governor in a certain way, but also like you're beholden to like federal rules. It's a very unique and hard seat to run for. And I think at the end of the day, Trump knows how to turn out those low propensity. And I know everyone like rolled their eyes when they were turning out the 0 out of 4 voters, but that is Trump's magic. He connects with those 0 out of 4 voters, and they come out for him in election cycle. So
what do you expect from 2025? We talk John in particular, and I think part of why he's been so successful, he talks about the industrial base a lot and the manufacturing nature of the district. I know he's going to be in the room when these discussions are had, but from what you know, what's the early theory on what can be done to make Detroit build again?
Make Detroit build again. Well, yes, I agree. Detroit should build again. I mean, when it's so funny when I travel, and part of the reason is because the Detroit Lions are so hot right now. Everyone's like, oh, you're from Detroit. It's great. And I was like, well, yes, but I think another part is people know us for our auto industry, and we are the city that put the nation on wheels. And I think our state needs to have a comeback at some level and an overall renaissance. And I think part of that is now, Michigan's congressional delegation is a Republican majority now. So the House seats that we hold in DC is now, our state delegation is now overwhelmingly Republican. And so I think at a certain level, everyone wants that renaissance to happen for the state of Michigan down the road, and Detroit. And I think part of that is our manufacturing and automotive sector. And I think John is going to be on the forefront of that. Whatever President Trump decides to do, I know John will be very good at taking the issues to him and saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Hey, this is what I'm hearing. These are what the manufacturers are telling me. Because when people see these layoffs happening at the automotive plants, it's not just the automotive plants, it's their vendors and their tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers that are affected, and workers who work there.
So many jobs down the line are affected.
Yep. So I think President Trump wants to revitalize that at every level, and I know John will be there to help him every step of the way. They know how important Michigan is. They never took it for granted, and I'm not just saying electorally. They know how important it is. They know for the future of this nation how important Michigan and Detroit will be.
You know, from hearing you talk about it a little bit, you know, there was some derision with the Macomb as ground zero headline, the typical stuff, the diner story. None of us like that stuff. Is it fair to say, is it accurate to say that Macomb County might bristle a little bit about being the center of gravity the way it is?
We don't bristle with it per se. I mean, we enjoy it because we know how hard we work, and we know, what our county has to offer the rest of the nation. Right. So we don't bristle with it. But what the part we resent is that Dems are like, oh, I can't, what did we get wrong? Let's do a post-election moratorium. What happened? It's like, you take us for granted every single year, and then you fly in the 11th hour and you're like, let's do a diner interview on CNN and talk about how hard it is for people. It's like, live this every day, not just the one day you come in and shoot a story. So yeah, it's difficult, but they, people in Macomb and Detroit are very hardworking people. They get on, they put their big boy pants on every day, and they work through it. And I think they don't cover that part enough. That's something people have to deal with. These issues, inflation, cost of living, energy costs rising, everything is more expensive. And I think they want to cover that one day. And for us, we don't want to be the center of the attention just one day. We want you to understand that, these are issues that affect people every day. And, the one person who did listen and understand that it affects them every day was Donald Trump and John. John did a great job connecting with people on the issues.
I thought you made a great point about abortion, where to me, Democrats were a victim of their own success from 2 years ago. When you pass abortion without limits, and yes, that was terrible to lose that. But in a way, it was a blessing in disguise, because quite frankly, if you're a Republican, if you love your kids, maybe they won't have abortions. So who does it really affect? Maybe not the home front so much. Maybe this is people passing laws that affect them personally, and it's not as big a deal as you thought. But when you put it back on the ballot, when you say 2 years later that it's on the ballot, it felt like the girl who cried wolf, the governor who cried wolf, where the claim that a wolf is there doesn't just have to be true. It has to feel true, or people will stop responding. People stop rising to the occasion. How do you see this abortion on the ballot rhetoric, which just failed for the first time, really?
Yeah, I mean, let's go back to the beginning, right? It's a culture issue for the Dems. They are arrogant. They're condescending. They think they know better than the electorate. And they were proven wrong on election day. They said, people said, oh, I can't afford my gas. I can't afford my groceries. I can barely make my car payment or my rent payment right now. I'm really struggling. And they said, okay, that's great, but let's talk about abortion. And everyone's like, well, that's a settled issue. How does this help me pay, make my bottom line budget every day? They thought they knew better, in all the conversations Gretchen Whitmer had on the national stage, Carl Marlinga, all these people who are considered leaders in the Democrat Party in Michigan. They really just had an off-putting tone that nobody really liked. And I think, let's also go back to the part that they did the great late replacement theory. They thought they knew better, what was better for their party in the country, and they just kicked Biden out, and that was the end of it.
Didn't bother asking voters, hey, who might you guys want instead? Just do a straw poll.
Their favorite thing is, oh, let's do a post-election moratorium, or whose fault is this, or what happened here? How do we pick up the pieces? They really need to look inside themselves and, see that they're not connecting with people because they don't care about the issues. They say Republicans are the ones who want to talk about culture wars. I think part of this election was a referendum on how Democrats handled COVID. People wanted to go back to normality. They wanted to go back to work. They wanted their kids to go back to school. They wanted to be, now we've got crazy things. I'm not even a mom, and I'm appalled by what's happening in schools. We've got crazy things happening in schools, crazy things happening in the military and beyond right now culturally. And that's all Democrats want to talk about. And Republicans are like, I will bring you a solution. We will fix the economy. We will fix, your beloved manufacturing industry, and we're going to move forward, and we're going to make our country great again. and bring it back to what it was. And, part of this is I often think about my grandfather when I work. He was a World War II veteran. He was a lifelong Democrat, and he was a union iron worker for the local 25. And I think he would be appalled by today's Democrat Party. They don't care anymore. And I think if he was here today and, in 2016, we would have definitely voted for Trump, because it's not our grandfather's Democrat Party anymore. They have changed what they care about and culturally, and left behind their electorate.
You mentioned that this was kind of a referendum on COVID, and I think for Whitmer in particular, that's true on two counts. So not only does the Republican Party win control of the Michigan House, the only house of any legislature in America to flip on Tuesday, on November 5th, but Whitmer's friend, Curtis Hertel Jr. Hertel's dad gave Whitmer her first job in politics. She made Hertel her chief of staff. I mean, they're hand in glove. They're family friends, and Whitmer's coattails anymore are not even big enough to pull a family friend across a Lansing area seat. Am I going too far? Is there anything to be inferred from what the Michigan voter feels about Gretchen Whitmer from how the election went?
Well, let's start with people are tired of Gretchen Whitmer. They're tired of the trendy headlines. They're tired of the TikToks.
The Dorito communion was it for a lot of people.
So as a Catholic person, so offensive, by the way. And her saying, and this is like, if we want to go back to the Democrats' arrogance, her saying, I'm sorry you felt that way. That is the whole problem within their party. That offended people. And her response was basically, well, I'm sorry you felt that way.
That's the apology you get from a manager at Panera Bread when they put the wrong mayo on your bacon turkey Bravo.
Yeah, exactly. Which, by the way, love the bacon turkey Bravo. It's a top 5, but Panera's gone downhill. That's a combo for another day. It's their arrogance, and I think people are tired of Whitmer. They're tired of her race to be VP, how she handled COVID. It's very obvious that she used this as a stepping stone for something bigger, and I think at the time she was very good at manipulating people into thinking she cared about the issues, but she doesn't. She cares about advancing her own personal agenda, and I think we learned that when she got to jet set during COVID, and, people, close friends of mine, separated from their families during COVID, had to see parents and family members die alone. And she just didn't care. She didn't care, and everyone was tired of it. And I think part of that trickled down to Hertel and, other Democrats across the state. We had a lot of, cheers to HRCC and props to them. They did a great job recruiting candidates, especially in John's district, to flip the House. Ron Robinson, one of them, a Marine veteran who's very well known in the Utica community. Riley Linting downriver. We've got a lot of, great candidates who represent their communities and, give a fresh perspective and change. And I think part of that was they weren't rubber stamped by Whitmer, and people said, that's what I want. I want something different. I want something that represents me.
We'll get you out of here on this one, Hannah. I know you're on vacation. I'd like you to get back to that, but it's never too early to talk about the future in politics. So 2026,
I know exactly what this is.
Has already begun. You happen to know John James pretty well. Who would excite you? Are there any names that excite you? When we talk about who could be Michigan's next governor, are there any names that excite you?
Well, obviously I'm biased, and I think John would, regardless of what he decides to do, and I think he's very smart right now, and I'm not going to put words in his mouth right now. He's very focused on his job at hand and helping President Trump transition. They have a tall task revitalizing the manufacturing industry in our district and across the country, and I think he will be a very trusted voice by the president to move that forward. So I think he's very focused, while people are jockeying for leadership, I think he's very focused on doing his job at hand and, supporting his districts. Now, with that said, John has a very bright future, and he'd be a great leader for Michigan, where we traditionally have lacked one for a couple of years. Democrats have had Gretchen Whitmer. They've had, all these talking heads who have been great and people always go to when they talk about Michigan. Right. And I think John could very well be that. And he excites, a lot of people. He has appeal across many coalitions and communities. And I think, whatever he decides to do, he'll be great at it.
Is Michigan ready for a black male governor?
100%. 100%. I think it's time for the Republican Party to showcase, the great talent we have and the great leaders we have and thinkers who want to change our country and, move not just our country, but our state forward. Michigan, is falling behind in reading scores for children. Shameful. People are leaving the state en masse. It is shameful. Yeah. And it's hard to see this state that I love go that way. And, there's very few people to blame, me chief among them, the Democrat Party. But, we have a bright future ahead, regardless of who we elect. And I think John would be, just whatever he decides to do, he would be a good, person in that universe.
What does the future hold for you? Heads Washington, tails Michigan. What does it hold?
We'll see. I don't know. I would like to stay in Michigan and, help move our state forward. This gubernatorial election will be pivotal for a lot. State Senate will be up. State House will be up. We'll have, it'll be John's
Secretary of State. Maybe we can even get someone in there who can count votes.
Secretary of State, Attorney General. There's a lot of bright names for, Attorney General. Andrew Fink just came off a Supreme Court race. He would be really good. There's a lot of young people who are quietly working their way up the ranks who would be great candidates in the coming years. And I think if Republicans do what they're supposed to and they take their time and they do this right, we could, nominate a lot of great candidates in the next couple of years for seats up and down the ticket.
Awesome. Hannah, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. It will not be your last visit.
First visit. I hope not.
But thank you for shedding light and thank you for believing in Michigan enough to come back from Washington.
I do. I'm not the only one. There are a lot of people who go and come back. It gives you good perspective and it makes you appreciate your home and where you came from a lot more.
Oh, you know what? We'll actually get you out of here on this one. Having seen all, both of these communities, could someone who's really seen the finest of life in Washington, as James has,
the Capitol Grill,
could someone really go from there to little old Lansing? Where, hey, guys, nothing personal. I do understand there's a great Chipotle they've put in recent years in Lansing, but it's not.
Talk about another city that needs a revitalization is Lansing.
You can't even say make Lansing great again. You would just have to make it great.
Great to begin with. That's the perfect example of Dems having total control. They've had control for so many years, and I feel like every month or every 6 months or so, I wake up and I see on social media a friend post like, "Oh, this restaurant's leaving downtown Lansing. It's no longer there." Or, "Oh, I tried to go to XYZ today and they're no longer open." And it's like, yeah, it's a revolving door.
These are shocking news. So
is it shocking? I don't think it surprised those of us who live here. And I think those of us who do live here want to see that stop happening.
But that is my point of skepticism with John James. Aside from whether he would want to do it, politically, just the quality of life. I see a real issue there. Like, who would, in their right mind, if they got to choose both, who would go from Washington to Lansing?
Well, I think, in our case, we've got a lot of good elected officials who do it, to help people. And it's because they have servant's heart, and the task at heart it's very fulfilling to help people. Right. And I think Tom Barrett is somebody who, doesn't really want to go to DC, but does it to help people in his community. John is someone who doesn't really want to go to DC.
Right.
Yeah. Totally different things for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Hannah, where can people find you on social media if you want them to find you on social media?
Oh, well, they can find me on social media, but they have to do the handiwork of finding me themselves. I'm sure they'll find me.
You know what?
If they want to. That's my famous saying. If you want to know something bad enough, you'll find it. And usually that ends up being true.
Well, I'm sure our YouTube viewers will seek you out. So, Hannah, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.